Eugenics is a loathsome pseudoscience. The problem here is that eugenics also represents the concepts in which the edifices of modern psychology and psychiatry are built upon. Under the pretense of the amelioration or betterment of society, this erroneous and spurious philosophy is quite depraved. Compulsory or forced medication is very similar to compulsory or forced sterilization. There is scant evidence that psychiatry is a valid science because it simply is not. What you see here is a long history of a struggle for eugenics to be legalized in the court system, all the way up to the Supreme Court. That is what Buck versus Bill was about. Dr. Priddy and the attorney Strode, the lawyer, trying to pass eugenics and sterilization as common and legal legislation. They say these people are afflicted with feeble-mindedness and licentiousness. The pauperism is an affliction. They take advantage of your lack of comprehensiveness when it comes to intellectual jargon and legal nonsense. We see a history of covert warfare, germ warfare, the smallpox on blankets. It makes you wonder, when the smallpox and vaccines and other diseases and vaccines were found, does it not remind us of the intentional infection of Native Americans who on record died of diseases? That was one of the major causes of death for the early Native Americans, or rather the ones who made contact with the early settlers. It was Lord Jeffrey Amherst, the British royal governor of Virginia. He was famous for his bloody wars against the Indians. He came up with the idea, they went through with it. And he was one of those experts with fancy words, like extirpate, and referring to Native Americans as this execrable race. Fancy words that most of you do not understand. But yet you put your faith in the hands of these experts and the governing class. They are experts, all right, in immorality, mass murder, depravity, and unethical behavior. I do not doubt for a moment that they are the experts. But I entirely doubt that they should be allowed to have positions of power and to be able to rule over us. E.E. Southard, the psychiatrist. Dr. Priddy, the psychiatrist and surgeon. Davenport, Harvard, biology, zoology. The experts and the court system have historically failed us, and they were still sterilizing people on record into the early 80s, around the time that I was born. Some of these people would claim that the drop in crime nationwide is due to eugenic policies being applied and administered covertly, and that America should keep them up. Many of you are not aware of these arguments because the people who rule over us believe that the masses of people are too ignorant and do not have sound judgment. Therefore, they should not be allowed to make their own decisions, but rather they should be left in the hands of the old money privileged ruling class and their unscrupulous experts who quite often are in secret societies that are being controlled by the agents of the elite, be it the Berzelius Society, Scroll and Key, Skull and Bones. There are hundreds of secret societies, and many of them are on college campuses, even University of Michigan, where both of my brothers went to school. Not to mention the Freemasons, who on record were able to place many of the presidents of the United States into office. They were Freemasons from George Washington on. So when you look at this thing, historically, the pharmaceutical companies and those who have access to viruses and diseases use them for covert warfare. And then they would turn around and take advantage of the resulting environment and political climate to strip their victims of their rights and what is rightfully theirs, their rightful place in society, their land, their potential economic advancement, their potential wives, and the admiration of their potential wives. This is what they do historically, and they never stop doing it. In fact, the same families that do it are still around. Rothschild, Rockefeller, Bill Gates. And these aren't just some random people. These are some of the richest people in the world. Just recently, I believe his name was Adelson, gave $100 million or pledged $100 million to Trump's campaign because he liked his stance on Israel. All these politicians sold out. Even the controlled opposition, such as Donald Trump, that claimed to fund their own campaign. How far do you think he could really get funding his own campaign? And do you think he would put so much money into his own campaign? It's one risky gamble, don't you think? Of course there was other people funding his campaign. Of course there was deals under the table where he funds his own campaign, they help him out with his business ventures, quid pro quo, what have you. Eugenics is alive and well. And do you expect people who wage covert wars to come out and admit it? Do you expect them not to try to discredit anyone who exposes what they're doing? Do you think Lord Jeffrey Amherst told the Native Americans, hey, look, we're going to put smallpox in your blankets, because why we pretend to care about you and say we love you and hear and act like we care? Or do you think they just did it and covered it up for a long time? And to this day, what do they teach you about Native Americans? Oh, they caught diseases and no one knows how. But really, we do know how. It's on record. Most of them were killed intentionally as part of biological, chemical, and germ warfare. This is what they do. Do you think they haven't done it before? Do you think these rich, privileged families are not still around? Those of you who believe in the Illuminati, what do you think they're called? Bloodlines. They're generational eugenicists. They are generational eugenicists. I don't think you people understand the type of scum that I am talking about here. I don't think you understand how serious this is. And all you cowards who are going to say, oh, he's just mad because he's a loser who lives with his parents and all this bitch shit you're going to say. He's a black guy who thinks that the world's against him. Just another black guy who thinks the world's against him, except for he wears a tinfoil hat and he has a mental illness that he doesn't want to admit to himself. Yeah, Dr. Pretty would have agreed with you. E.E. Stothard would have agreed with you. Madison Grant, Davenport, Eugen Fisher, Ernst Rudin, they would have all agreed with you with a big smile on their face. One could argue you can judge the worth of a man by who agrees with him and who doesn't. The people who agree with you are the lowest scum in history when you try to discredit me. When you use these overgeneralizations, oversimplifications, and these logical fallacies to try to pretend that I am wrong. Your erroneous argument, your error-filled judgment have no place in society unless you concede that we live in a society that pushes unscrupulous social norms for the benefit of the ruling class. Now, I can understand why cowards would uphold these social norms around their social controllers and the governing class. But to do so when no one is around, when no one is looking, that is despicable. Either way, it's despicable, but that is especially and particularly despicable. Unless, of course, you concede that Big Brother is always looking and always watching. But wouldn't that make you a conspiracy theorist? Wouldn't that make you, on the level of a black person, the typical black person who says that there's a massive conspiracy to oppress black people? Doesn't that mean that you should wear a tinfoil hat as well? Very interesting. These eugenicists said that people clamored to be sterilized. And you know what? They were right. Because in order for them to be discharged from mental institutions, they had to agree to be sterilized. And so the Hegelian principle came into play, and they met halfway. In order for many people to to get discharged from mental institutions, they need to agree to take their eugenic medications that kill 500,000 people a year in Western countries alone. You have no idea how miserable it is to be victimized by the people you want to kill more than you want to breathe. To be in and out of their institutions while eugenicists, social controllers, and shills tell you, I don't feel sorry for you. You did something you weren't supposed to do. I agree. I did something that I was not supposed to do in the eyes of society and the social engineers and the social controllers. It's called doing the right thing. You should grow a pair and try it sometime, pal.